Awesome. Thank you, guys. I am so excited to be here and talking about this topic because it's a huge topic of interest to me. I lead our brand marketing team at 7-Eleven, so I have a lot to learn, and I'm going to listen to every word that you guys say and probably call you later with more questions. But I'm going to start by having you each introduce yourselves, your role, and of course, your favorite Slurpee flavor.
So I get to start. Well, I just introduced myself. So Dave Helmreich at Innovid. It's not just one. I mix cherry and blue raspberry.
Of course, yeah, that's fair.
It's the only way to do it.
I don't know if I can compete with that. That was a good Slurpee. I'm Kellie Barnett, head of media strategy with Samsung Mobile Experience. So phones, tabs, PCs, buds, all of that exciting electronics. But what is my favorite Slurpee? Gosh, you know what? I'm going to go with what my 6-year-old loves, which is the traditional cherry Slurpee.
It is one of our popular flavors. Such a popular.
Hi, my name is Jenna Moore. I'm the Director of Social Media and Content for Teton Bridge. We are the premier Western lifestyle brand and working with sports and entertainment. My favorite is a combination as well. Coke and cherry. I'm a big cherry Coke fan. However, it's not just a combination. It's 3 parts Coke, 1 part cherry.
Yeah, that's good. That's smart. Mine is pina colada, by the way. Yeah. We like to do hard Slurpees too, so you gotta make some like wow with that pina colada. So,
Now we're changing the game.
Yeah, I like it.
Yeah. All right. So I'm gonna start with trends. So looking back a little bit of what's been happening in media over the last few years. So this one is a question for all of you, so you can each provide your answer. But what do you consider to just be the most significant recent trends that you've seen in media in your specific role? Who wants to start?
I'm happy to jump in there. I mean, I think, we all know that the media landscape changes so fast. Before you can blink, there's something new on the horizon. And for me personally, I think that one of the things we have to stay focused on from a marketing perspective is not to become overwhelmed by the options that the media landscape fragmentation presents. There's so many more options now, so many more ways to reach your target audience. I think from a marketing perspective and certainly from an integrated media perspective, you need to be laser focused on this is my target audience. These are the channels that I know I can reach them with. And more importantly, these are the partners that if I'm going to invest in them, you better believe they're going to invest in us too. And what I mean by that is, how are you going to show up and say, not just I have this package for you, this is how we're going to reach your audience, but this is how I'm going to help you understand the effectiveness of your message reaching that audience. I'm going to help you measure that, and I'm going to help prove that we are driving your business ROI with this investment. So for me, it's not being overwhelmed by fragmentation and choices and being laser focused.
From my perspective, one of the biggest things is, from a content perspective, is the change of what we call quality content. It used to be, especially in social and digital, very premier, very prestigious, very perfect. And there's such a shift in what that content people are consuming. A lot of that has to do with the younger generation, being able to see through that perfection, right? There's more of an eagerness for kind of the imperfect ways of creating content and the relatability. So I think a big shift is, and a lot of it has to do with influencers, right? People feel more connected. They feel like they can relate more to that not, perfectly polished content. And so between that and influencers, I think that's one of the biggest things, is what we define as quality content and what is relatable to whoever that demographic is. Because obviously the changes in the demos and understanding where to be, what Kellie said, we can't be in one place anymore. We can't just be traditional. We can't just be digital. But where is our demographic at, and how do we adjust the content we're creating and where we're publishing that in a really strategic way?
Yeah, and I think you heard it from John on the stage before. We talked about that not being interruptive or disruptive, but engaging. So all of us, and even people in the room today, we all live on multiple devices all the time. If you're watching TV, you're also watching with other people. You're also on a phone or an iPad or your laptop. And because we multitask perpetually, because there is a challenge for attention, you have to make sure, and again, it's going to sound trite, but you have to make sure that you're sort of engaging with consumers where they're spending time and where they're paying attention. And it's not just one thing. So it could be social. At the moment, you're actually running a TV campaign. It could be taking advantage of those imperfect moments, like Oreo dunk in the dark. What was the one that happened this week with the billboard, the baseball game? Right, so like
Coors Light.
sold out. Like created a can and a campaign with a missing tile on the board and sold out instantaneously. So like that was a moment of like perfect engagement with the team that was on it, and that was funny and disruptive and sort of self-effacing, but it's a pleasant way to engage with the brand.
And I think personality too, to your point. Like brands are starting to embrace themselves more and the personality behind the brand as opposed to having to be this front-facing, always serious brand. Embracing that moment kind of gives you that personality. It makes you connect with the brand more.
Yeah, and I think just the agility that's required now to run a media campaign. You planned media, you ran the media, you waited to see what the media did, and we just don't.
Those days are long.
Yeah,
with like the properly constructed funnel and the very pretty primrose painted path that we tried to force consumers to walk down. Guess what? We're like, I'm not going that way. I'm going to go this way, and we have to be there to react to it.
Yeah,
From my perspective, Marissa, just throughout my years of experience, I think there's no more companies that go to market and say we're direct response, we're brand. No. At the end of the day, everything is working together, and you have to show ROI for what you're putting in the market, and in some way or form, apply it to a direct response model.
Yeah. Well, and obviously we've seen consumer behavior changing just drastically over the last few years. So as we think about those behaviors changing, how are you seeing media investments kind of follow that change?
Well, I'll go first here. From our experience, I think it certainly shifts based on consumer habits, and this should be no surprise to anyone in this room. But even just taking a step back and talking about traditional offline versus online. Of course, we're shifting more to online. That's where everyone is. That's where the measurements are. But you still have to understand online where to reach them. We're going from traditional, what would be considered your traditional digital outlets to more social to influencer. Influencer by far over the last few years. It's always been an important element, but now it's becoming even more important. How do we integrate our influencer content into our paid media? How do we ensure that our owned, our earned, our paid, our influencer are all working together holistically?
Yeah, for us, we're in Western sports and lifestyle. So as you can imagine, a lot of our original demographic is an older generation. We're a couple steps back from, the new age, but we are, we're looking for that next generation of consumers. That is younger fans, and we have to go to where they are. So a lot of that is transitioning into that digital media space. Over the past 9 months, we've had new leadership come in. Deirdre Lester, our CEO, she came from Barstool Sports, which obviously is a huge media driver and such an impactful force in the media space. And so we have shifted a ton of our focus from some of that traditional stuff while not leaving those people, because obviously they're the core of who Western is. But Cowboy's cool right now. So hence the hat and the cowboy boots. So we are making a big investment into going to those digital spaces where our consumers are. For instance, more and more sports are being streamed on these FAST channels, on these Paramounts, on these Pluto TVs, and so we're having to shift, where we're spending those dollars and how we're making content too, right? We can't just, to your point, we can't just create long form, we can't just create, 30s and 15s anymore, but how do we take that one piece of content and put that everywhere in different forms? So I think that's a huge part of how we're mixing up and transitioning a lot of where our media is spent and how we're distributing and creating that media.
Yeah, that actually, I did have a question around just how the shift of owned and earned is either is it greater, is it lesser? Like how is it working now with paid? I know we've talked about that. Some of you guys have talked about that in the last session, just how important I think earned and owned are becoming in that mix. That how it's changing. Is there anything you would add to that?
I would add that it is, and free is the wrong word, but it's important amplification of a message that you actually want to get out to the market. And so all of us have created relationships with friends and professional networks and LinkedIn and others. And your friends engage in your content more than they do with something if it's presented to them the first time. So the brands that are taking advantage of that, we spend a ton of money building campaigns. We then push them out, and then in many cases, we don't pay enough attention to the earned and the owned on the tail of that. And that's where everyone should amplify what they're doing. Most brands are not, in general, most brands are not doing it well. I would say we are not doing it well as a company. And it's a huge miss if when you launch these things with your customers, with your employees, that you're not amplifying that into the market so that your customers become your biggest advocates, not just the message that you paid to get on TV.
Marissa, I actually have an example recently, and again, I think even with Samsung, it's learning as you go, right? As everything changes, you need to test, you need to push yourself forward. But the integration of influencer and owned and earned, it cannot live without each other. One does not live without the other. And one of the things that we really have leaned into this year heavily is ensuring that anything we're doing, or ensuring that we're looking at opportunities from a paid media perspective and saying, how should we utilize potentially influencer-created material to put into paid? Can we use our high-profile influencers to create a net new creative to run? We did that in Daytona. We actually bought 2 minutes of time in the Daytona 500 race, partnered with our Dude Perfect influencers, filmed a Dude Perfect race here at the racetrack, and highlighted our new S24 phone. And we did that not just in the Daytona 500 race, but we did it with sending our influencers to the race. We sent it, we had social, we had every which way around PR. It was all touching that activation, and we really are trying to learn from that. But I'll tell you, by and far, what we're learning is that type of approach significantly increases consideration.
Yeah, I would agree with that. We work a lot with athletes too, and we kind of, not that they're our employees, but how we treat them and the money that we are providing them through the competitions that that we're hosting and creating, they're advocates of us, and they have fans themselves. And I think it's natural consumer behavior. It goes back to the word of mouth, to trust those around you and trust those who relate to you. And so the more and more we have them talking great things about us because of how we treat them, back to relationships, far and wide outperforms what we tell, what we say to the audiences and the demographics. And so I think that's how, it's always been, we need to build brand trust, and we have to be the narrative around that. And I think that's another shift in the market, is that it's okay to trust your fans, your loyal, I know we talked about loyal fans earlier, but allowing them and trusting them to be that voice for you and allowing them to build that trust for you on your behalf.
Sense. We are really focused on the car community at 7-Eleven, which is crazy. You're like, why would that happen? People love to take pictures of their cars in front of 7-Eleven stores, and so we've really leaned heavily into that. But now that we're kind of in that community and it happens so organically, we have a ton of credibility with that group, and they've embraced us. We've embraced them. So
that's the dream.
It happens. Those things that happen organically is really where you get the most.
How did it start?
Well, we about 4 years ago, when we revamped our social strategy, we really looked at what are our fans doing, and we started posting some of this car content, literally pictures of cars in front of 7-Eleven stores at night. You have the neon lights. It makes for a really great shot, especially if it's a cool car, and it was our highest performing content. So, you go from there, and it just kind of spiraled into a really great relationship with that fandom. And so a lot of creators, a lot of influencers within that space, but it's, it's helped propel what we're doing from a social media perspective. So So changing gears a little bit, what are the biggest challenges that you think media companies are facing as they work with you guys, or what you guys are seeing in the market? Like, what are they having to overcome in order to continue to be relevant?
And we say media, I mean, talking about from a content creator perspective, or
I'm thinking like media, or like media platforms.
Yeah. So I'll start. I think the biggest challenge, and Becky and I were talking about this earlier today, is that the size of and I'll just say big tech for a second. That's not the right phrase, but like Facebook and Amazon and Netflix and Google are massive multi-trillion-dollar companies now, and that's changed dramatically in the last decade. And the problem is that they have so much money. Like yesterday on stage in New York, one of my friends from Netflix said you can't spell Netflix without the NFL. So where do you think the NFL is going to go? And where do you think the Super Bowl is going to go? So I think the challenge for all of us is there are so many dollars at play in some of the largest companies in the world. There's a big sucking sound out of everything else. And whether it's fast channels, whether it's subscriptions, I think for all of us, fragmentation gives us the ability to get to these unique audiences. I do see a future that if we don't power and deliver enough revenue back into the content creators and those publishers and those platforms, that we will have 3 companies in the world that'll own and deliver all of the content. And that's not good for any of the marketers in this room.
I will tell you what's top of mind for me these days, which is that the deprecation of cookies and our ability to target, track, and measure success across our partners. And that's something that we all are dealing with, right? And for me and for us as a company, it really you stand out as a partner if you are coming to us with future-proofing ideas to ensure that we are still able to deliver on our business objectives with your company. And that's really the forefront of my thoughts these days.
Yeah, that's a big one for sure.
I think from a social and digital perspective, there's so much consumption of social and content online. One of the biggest things for me right now is how do we take likes to followers and loyalists? Because if you go through analytics now on social, likes used to be the baseline of what we considered success. It's no longer. You can get on TikTok and like. But did you convert them to a follower? Did you convert them to a loyalist? I think that's a really big challenge with so much consumption of media. How do you create content? How do you captivate their attention for long enough to make them take that next extra step? I think that's a huge thing. And then I think another one for me right now is understanding, utilizing the data and understanding where should you be instead of having to be everywhere. The perfect solution or the perfect world is we want to be a little bit of everywhere, and that's just not possible for every single brand and every single staff. And also, just because your competitor is there doesn't mean that's where your audience is and what's going to work for you. So, I'm trying to be more strategic about where do I need to be that's really performing, and I know I can create really great content and be really successful and connect with my audience and my next generation of Western fans and people that aren't there yet too. Because, I said Cowboys cool, but how do we bring those people that have never been to a Western event, have never worn a cowboy hat, have never worn cowboy boots, and welcome them in? And a lot of times that's through the content. But you can't be everywhere. So being strategic about choosing where you're going to be and where you feel confident that your fans are.
Yeah, a huge piece of that is the measurement piece and knowing what's working, right? So speaking of measurement, how will innovation and media measurement capabilities start to shape future trends? Dave, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I'll start. I don't know any marketer today that says that I just care about things that are not related to performance or that are just proxies for performance. And none of us are getting paid, nor if you're a public company or a private company, none of us are getting paid because of likes. And we're not getting paid because of impressions. On unfortunately, right?
No, we are not.
Yeah, and we're not, right? And so fortunately, unfortunately. And so the reality is outcomes matter everywhere. And if you don't, and 5 years ago, outcomes were later. 10 years ago, they were almost never. Now today, they should be near real time. So if you think about investments across the board, what's performing? And this isn't removing the engagement. This isn't removing the cultural relevance. This isn't removing the art from what we do. But the science and art have to go hand in hand. If you're not measuring everything that you're doing and understanding, are you actually getting the return on ad spend? I think Home Depot said, our ROMO is the new word, return on marketing objectives. If you're not getting ROMO or ROAS as a marketer, you're probably missing something. And so we're all DR today, because if you spend $1 million or 10 or 100, are you getting more than that back based on your investment? That's critical.
Yes, it is. And the ability to showcase what that means throughout the funnel, meaning media that is not a last click attribution methodology, is challenging to anyone, anywhere, any day. However, it's our job to help lead and understand how does the impact of more of an awareness driving media push people through the funnel. What does that mean? Because at the end of the day, if you don't have upper funnel reach of audience, you're going to dry up that bottom funnel. So you need to show how that all works and how that all fits together. Now, I would love an MTA tool that did that in a way that I trusted, but we're working on it, and we're working with our agency, Starcom. They are helping push us in that direction, and we're trying to understand the business ROI to every channel and partner we invest in. Because at the end of the day, that is our responsibility to our company, to show that we're not investing dollars in a way that's ineffective.
Absolutely. So going back to some of the conversation earlier around purpose-driven, just thinking about sustainability or DEI, how is the landscape changing as it relates to the responsibilities that marketers and media companies have in that space? And I know, Dave, you guys are thinking about this with Ad Net Zero, so I'd love to hear how you guys are approaching it.
Yeah, we have, and we've done this because our customers and our agencies and our partners have asked us, right? So one, we want to make sure, and TV is an interesting animal. So TV and CTV today, and the intersection of what's happening with TV and linear. So as a company, we deliver 1.3 billion TV commercials a day for brands. If you do the math, it's only a 15-second spot. It's over 900 years worth of content delivered every day. There's a lot of waste that we can take out of that process by removing more computers, removing fewer hops. So what's one of the reasons why we partner with Ad Net Zero is to say, listen, this Scope 3 emission reduction is a goal for most companies in the world, and a lot of companies in this room. How do we actually help with that process to, if I have to talk to it, and I say talk, but if I have to have one less computer talk to one less computer as part of delivering an ad to all of you, and we do that billions of times a day, which is hundreds of billions of times a year, that's less heat, less energy required, and ultimately a better experience for the consumer, and less waste as part of the process. So we've been leaning into this. I'm excited about sort of more things to come, but it's been a big focus of what we're doing because it's not only the right thing to do, but also our customers are asking for it.
Anything to add? You guys? Okay, yeah. It's certainly important. I know that we'll continue to push on our media partners for that. So wanted to just see if you guys had anything in that regard. So I know I think we have about 5 minutes, maybe until lunch, but I want to see if anyone has any questions. Do we have any audience questions? We do.
Hi, Kelly.
Hi, nice to see you.
So question, you've touched upon cookie deprecation, and I know it's a hot topic for us, and Google again delayed it. So are you doing anything on the clean room? What's your approach? Have you been testing it? How successful you have been? Are you using any digital twins in the clean room? Just kind of share. Everybody, you can have.
Yeah, I think it really.
I want to learn. Yeah.
There are no options off of the table right now, right? We need to understand how we can work. It really honestly comes down what we're learning to how we work with each partner and how we're able to leverage what we already know about what works with that partner in a way that we can enable ourselves to future-proof moving forward. So I think there's not, right now, for us, there isn't a clear-cut answer of how we're going to handle this moving forward. It's almost like that freight train that's coming towards you and you're like, oh, we gotta figure this out. So we are, but at this point, it really is a conversation with our key partners first to understand how can we work individually with each of them to future-proof.
And then I know like there are several, browser solutions, they're, saving your privacy and all, but I wonder how the DSPs are going to take it. I mean, that's the big challenge, right?
Yeah, it absolutely is, 100%, yes.
Marissa, what about you? Anything you're experiencing in like clean room technology? Are you deploying them or are you testing with?
Yeah, so, well, we have, luckily at 7-Eleven, the benefit of very strong first-party data. We have about 95 million registered loyalty members. And so we're really starting to go back and look at that and go, okay, we've got to figure out how to actually leverage this to the best of our ability, because right now the reality is we just haven't from a media perspective. We obviously do from a CRM perspective, but really we're kind of going back to the drawing board there to figure out how do we use that data, and then how do we think about the right technology, clean rooms, everything to be able to more strongly rely on that. We launched our retail media network last year, and so that's obviously very reliant on our first-party data. And so how do we now start to think about even brand and retail media kind of coming together and using the same rails and the same technology and being able to prove out our brand media in the same way that we are our retail media? Because, I mean, the reality is, our retail media partners are getting probably quicker results than I'm getting from a brand media perspective. And so we're really trying to figure out how we kind of bring those together, and, kind of in the same place as most people. But yeah, that's how we're approaching it right now.
I will say that utilizing and understanding, number one, privacy is of utmost importance to us, of course. What I think every advertiser marketer needs to do is exactly what Marissa spoke to, which is understanding the data that you as your company have to clearly understand who your target audience is, not necessarily the personal ID, but what do they look like? Who are they? So that you're utilizing your own data to develop who these people are that we need to target, because at the end of the day, that's where everything is going to start moving forward.
So in a world with all these different social media platforms, they can be your best friend or your worst enemy, and negative feedback can be swift and immediate. So how do we avoid doing like what Bumble just did?
Ooh.
Do you want to take that one? Sounds like
I think that's the blessing, and not so much blessing, of social media is that it is one of the few marketing channels where you get feedback, immediate feedback, right? Like I always say, social media personnel are often the ones that know your audience better than anybody else, because we unfortunately sit behind the screen and see all the backlash that comes to us, or all the great things, right? So I think it's, we work very closely with our PR team to be able to handle those situations. It honestly is not one good answer, I would say, unfortunately, because you're gonna have that as a brand. You're never gonna always make the perfect decision. You're always gonna have somebody take something the wrong way. So for us, it's engaging with those people, trying to find the way to flip the script. But it's not an easy thing, and that's the hardest part about it, is like, you can never, and a lot of times you can't predict those things.
Yeah, I would add to that. I mean, from our perspective, it's the partnerships we have internally with our corporate communications team, with their external partners who provide us support, with our legal team. We spend a lot of time looking at things and going, okay, what's the risk of this? And luckily, social's a place where, you get a pretty immediate response. So you know whether something is or isn't resonating or working, and you can pivot, you can, kind of have a mitigation plan for it. But it's it's a little bit of the wild, wild west sometimes. So.
It is, but it's also an opportunity to adjust that brand narrative, right? How do you take what's happening? How do you take the feedback that, these people are coming at you with, and how can that adjust moving forward? And how can you kind of play off that in other ways? The feedback's good. I like the feedback usually, even if it's negative, because that's the only way you're going to learn from what's being said about your brand, right? Typically people aren't going to come up to you, especially if they don't, aren't your biggest fans, and be like, hey, let me tell you what you did terrible with it.
They will tell you online though.
Yeah, they will. They have no problem telling you online. But I embrace it, honestly. Like, I think that's one of the greatest parts about social is that we do get that direct engagement, whether or not it's necessarily valid. That not every piece of feedback is valid, but it definitely makes you, holistically think more about your brand in a way that you may not have been, especially from an endemic standpoint. When you're so passionate about a brand, you kind of need that chatter and that feedback sometimes to be able to elevate yourself and think in a different way that you may have not have thought about internally.
One of the things that we do at Samson is we reward we recognize our loyalists, our Samsung loyalists, the consumers that are very passionate about Android, and they will many times come onto a chat and defend our brand, stand up for why the Galaxy, why it is better than X, Y, and Z company, why they love Android. And what we do as a company is we reward that we will identify them, we'll send them packages, we internally term them Guardians of the Galaxy. They help bring an authentic voice to defending us, which I think is the most impactful response you can have.
Yeah, and we've had some negative chatter like that before too. And one of the biggest things is where else in the media landscape can you put your personnel in front of people to tell the narrative? We've had situations where there's been some chatter and there's been some narratives that weren't necessarily true. And so how did we combat that? We partnered with some podcasts to have our personnel, our executives on their podcast to directly talk about the situation. And a lot of times it's just confusion. It's because people don't dig, people don't know the real story. And so a lot of times I think we're scared to actually step up and tell that story, but find a different way. If it's, if the chatter's happening on social, find some podcasts that have your leadership go beyond. Find some, earned media, find some influencers, have an influencer event. I think one of the biggest things is taking digital offline and building that community is such a big thing. And you see it more and more with retail brands, right? The Revolves of the world, all these retail brands are starting to bring those communities, those passionate communities that they build online, and are bringing those communities in person. And those become your biggest advocates. So, when you're thinking about your customers from an online standpoint, think about the next step. How are you going to, back to that loyalist situation, what can you do, whether it be sending packages to your loyalists, whether it's an appreciation event that creates buzz and creates that positive voice, that you kind of get to curate with that community without coming out and being like, this is who we are, this is why we do it, and they get to be, ambassadors for you.
Yeah, that's exciting. All right, well, thank you guys. Please give a nice round of applause to